Hello, I'm Venita Blackburn, Professor of Fiction, here to introduce you to Fresno State's MFA program showcase of Rolando Villarreal's thesis manuscript, a novel in progress. So with each daily scroll through a news feed, the dystopian science fiction volumes of previous decades seem less like the cautionary tales they were intended to be and more like prophecies manifested. That is the tradition Rolando pulls from. More than once, he has written the future with words like virus and war, and I've declared to him that it's too soon. My heart to my mind is not ready, meaning we as an audience are not ready to engage in worlds so close to the nightmares of the present day. I'm starting to think I was wrong. The choice to engage or not is already gone. The choice for safety is gone, and we live in a sort of soft illusion. If we do not name the moments and compress them into language in order to understand ourselves, then we are already asleep. We are already lost. We are already ghosts that happen to miss the funeral. Rolando literally writes about grief and time, how the body stops moving and the forces that would capitalize on that state. Characters are literally frozen in order to sleep away the loss. The mayhem that follows is spectacular. Rolando writes, "The screams were not normal, a seemingly safe place of joy and commerce that was Disneyland is obliterated." The manuscript has the heart of a 1990s action movie, dark, brooding, but funny and insightful. When one of Rolando's characters is at his lowest, he manages to experience the divine. It reads, "Ezekiel felt peace. Despite his drunken state, he felt strongly that God had sent him a sign, that even perhaps the bearded man was God staring directly at him with an assuredness and affirmation so powerful that only his Lord could express." Now, I think the Ezekiel character was watching the Ten Commandments, starring Charlton Heston as Sexy Moses, but I'm not sure, and it's not important. What is important is the charming way Rolando reaches into the past to find the elements of our culture that shape perspective and pushes those into an imagined future. Among the exploration of terror through government conspiracies, the cinematic quality of the prose, and how it all depicts the unique horror of losing people we love, Rolando inserts moments of grace where the characters discover faith when most delirious and sometimes intoxicated. He writes, "The pools of grief had swelled in his eyes and clouded his vision, yet he felt that he was now seeing clearly. With his chin resting against his neck, his prickly beard stabbing at his skin, he mumbled hot-breathed words in response to God's call, speaking directly to the face on the screen. Lord, I know you're watching. I know I've strayed. Show me, Lord, show me the path." Rolando's characters have faith in each other and lose it, faith in their gods and lose it. They fight, they kill, they pray, scheme, try, bleed, fail, and try again. A whole new religion emerges, full of love and desperation. His talent and the story will make believers out of all of us. I introduce you to Rolando Villarreal.
Hi everyone, I'd like to first thank Professor Blackburn for recording the introduction to this video. And to say that I'm not great with emotional speeches, so I will do my best to read off the script without crying. I remember first receiving a call 3 years ago from former Professor Joseph Cassara informing me that I had been accepted into the MFA program. At the time, I imagined my largest struggles would relate to and be caused by 30-page homework assignments, sleepless studious nights, and strict professors. Who would have known that just months later, my academic, professional, and personal life would be greatly impacted by not only an international pandemic, but a divorce and an attempted coup to overthrow our American democracy. When Professor Cassara originally called me, I eagerly awaited submitting fiction stories focusing on topics like punk rock, murder, and sexuality. Yet, due to the last fucked up months of Donald Trump's presidency, I naturally gravitated towards starting a dystopian fiction novel, as one does. Throughout the past 3 years in the MFA program, I'm certain that every member of our group was challenged by growth. Though we know it to be necessary, growth is sometimes slow and painful. And though I am grateful for my experience in this program, my continued success within it would not have been possible without the help of a collection of individuals offering support and guidance along the way. For this reason, I'd like to thank the following people. First and foremost, my two loving parents for devoting their lives and bringing me comfort and warmth. My step-parents, Tony and Lydia, the world's greatest inherited set of parents. To my best friends, Carlo and Roach, who are always there, ride or die, whenever I need them. To my many families, the Lunas, the Villarreals, the Garzas, and the Muros for their consistent support. To any friend or student who was kind enough to read a rough draft and give me their honest opinion. To my coworker Ashley, who helped me maintain my sanity and my employment by serving as a pseudo-therapist at work. To Shannon Furtado, my earliest mentor, to whom I owe a career in English education because she fostered my love for reading and writing as a student in her 6th grade classroom. I'd also like to thank once again my chair, Professor Venita Blackburn, as well as Professor Joseph Casaro, and a special voice of gratitude to Professor John Hales, who graciously accepted a spot on my thesis committee despite his deserved retirement and despite the fact that my thesis is not a nonfiction piece about how Ariana Grande changed my life. I'm sure he would have loved that. Most importantly, this reading is dedicated to my grandparents, who fostered my value of education at such a young age, who taught my parents that love and warmth were the most important thing, and who thankfully still serve as my support system today. And specifically to my grandfather, whose trips to Barnes & Noble and career in academics helped establish my sense of literacy. Today I'm going to be reading from the first chapter of my novel currently titled America AD, which again is a dystopian fiction novel set 20, 30, and 40 years in the future. Ezekiel had allowed himself the proper time to grieve after the death of his wife. In quiet moments while Sam was under the care of his auntie, Ezekiel took to drinking in order to halt his thoughts and numb the pain. He made a nightly ritual out of grabbing a bottle of Southern Comfort whiskey and attempting to finish it before the ending of whatever movie happened to be playing on TV. One night, after months of blacking out on the living room couch, something changed. He had been watching an old program about cowboys that still referred to the indigenous population as Indians until it finished and the classic movie The Ten Commandments started playing. Ezekiel sat and watched as Charlton Heston parted the Red Sea, guiding his flock through it, promising protection from the evil Pharaoh. The evil emperor's army chased Moses' people through an opening between giant sea waves. Ezekiel suddenly froze, his eyes locked in, and the scene seemed to loop in place. On the screen, past the rocky bottom of the ocean's floor, under the black clouds of the seen sky, Ezekiel made out the face of a bearded man with a stern, fixed expression. He stared back at the face, studied it, while it rested in place for what felt like hours. Time was distorted. The scene was still playing, but there was no movement from Moses' people or the Pharaoh's army. There was only a slight movement, a hovering, from the face in the sky. Without understanding it, Ezekiel felt peace. Despite his drunken state, he felt strongly that God had sent him a message, that even perhaps the bearded man in the sky was God staring directly at him, with an assuredness and affirmation so powerful that only his Lord could express. He was quickly overcome with a deep sense of redemptive purpose. The pools of grief had swelled in his eyes and clouded his vision, yet he felt that he was now seeing clearly. With his chin resting against his neck, his prickly beard stabbing at his skin, he mumbled hot-breath words in response to God's call, speaking directly to the face on the screen. Lord, I know you're watching. I know I've strayed. Show me, Lord. Show me the path. Ezekiel and Sam arrived in Anaheim, California on July 2nd, 2023, exactly 6 months after the passing of Sam's mother. Neither had ever been to California. Ezekiel knew that if he and Sam were to return to any sort of normalcy, he needed to throw Sam a big celebration for his 4th birthday, something special. Ezekiel never touched alcohol again after the night in which he watched as Moses parted the Red Sea and saw the face. He viewed the calming of tumultuous waters as a symbol for him to move forward and push through the sadness which clung to him like summer humidity. In order to stay focused, to stay busy, to do right by his son, Ezekiel took overtime shifts every week at the sugar processing plant and eventually purchased 2 weekend passes to Disneyland. Upon arrival, Ezekiel had been so overwhelmed with the amount of traffic and smog in Anaheim. This was California, the supposed sunny state. Summertime back home meant swatting away flies and staining tank tops with layers of inescapable sweat. But in Southern California, it was as if smog was their humidity. He couldn't help but notice how gray everything looked, and how just about every time they left their hotel room and ventured out into the streets of Anaheim in search of a place to eat, they saw frizzy-haired men in torn military jackets standing on street corners and shouting nonsense directed in no particular direction. There was always a faint taste of piss in the air, the opposite of what he expected California to smell like. What he desired from this trip was a sort of elegance, a luxury, a picturesque view of California to store away in their memory for a lifetime. The websites and brochures showed only clear blue skies, beaches, and smiles. So far, he felt duped. For his son, he kept a smile on his face and positivity in his speech. "You excited to see Mickey in the gang tomorrow?" "Yeah!" Ezekiel was pretty sure his son didn't fully comprehend what Disneyland was. All he knew was he was excited about something. So his son became excited about that same thing. When his son looked up at him, he felt a deep, genuine understanding of what it meant to be loved. He knew this came with responsibility. He knew he needed to earn his son's love. He wanted his son to grow up and say, "My pop took me to Disneyland when I was 4 years old, and even though I was a youngin', I remember it was amazing." Losing his partner meant that Ezekiel now had to carry the weight of Sam's love squarely on his own shoulders. He made peace with this, and chose to see it as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. When he tucked Sam into bed that night in the cheapest motel he could find, he prepared him for the following day. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Ezekiel and Sam ate undersized and overpriced corn dogs together and watched a nearby dance routine playing in an outdoor theater. Between bites, Ezekiel took the time to appreciate the scene around him. He was in awe of the variety that Disneyland provided. Surrounding him were families of all ages and all races. He thought about his deceased wife and what she would have given to see her son experience it all. A sudden pang of emotion catapulted into his chest. He looked at his son, who carried some of his wife's features. Sam inherited his mother's nose, long and slender, the type that Ezekiel used to pinch playfully as he and his wife rolled around in bed. Sam had his father's dark hair, but he had his mother's eyes, dark brown, beautiful and wide, like 2 perfect tiger-eye gemstones. "Son, you know your mother's watching us." "Yeah, up in heaven. I miss her." "Me too. But you know what? She's here with us. I feel her. The Lord's given her the day off to spend time with us." "Is she rides with us?" Ezekiel smiled at the thought. "She sure is. And she wants you to know that you're loved. She wouldn't miss your birthday for anyone, even Christ Almighty himself." "But I don't see her." "Sometimes the best things in life are the things you can't see, son, but you feel them right here." Ezekiel placed his hand on Sam's chest and held it there as he met his eyes. His son used his index and middle finger to perform a tiny dance routine over the top of his father's calloused hands in response. "Let's get cotton candy," Sam said. Ezekiel grabbed Sam's hand, checked the map on his phone, and headed south toward the nearest snack center. Sam walked next to him, blowing bubbles out of a new wand they had just purchased. As he looked up ahead, at the Matterhorn, Ezekiel noticed that it looked slightly different than what he had seen earlier in the day. The top of the Matterhorn was now emitting some sort of icy mist, maybe an effect that kicked in as the day went on, he thought. It sounded as if the ride was extremely popular, because as they walked closer toward it, Ezekiel heard the screams of guests. It took only a few minutes for Ezekiel to realize that the screams were not normal, that they didn't start and stop again, as they normally would while bobsleds made their way in and out of the crevices of the makeshift mountain. The screams they heard only grew louder, more prominent, and more consistent with each passing second. Soon, Ezekiel saw the mist he had mistakenly thought was coming from the mountain was actually flowing into the sidewalk in front of him, blowing in the direction of Sleeping Beauty's castle. Suddenly, his eyes saw what his brain couldn't yet register. Crowds of people were running toward him, his eyes fixed on a large white man running in an all-out sprint, his face fixed in a wide smile. The man's eyes were wide open, as if someone were forcing them open, and he was looking toward the sky as if he were chasing an airplane without regard to anything in front of him. As the man ran past him, Ezekiel caught a glimpse of the face up close. There had seemed to be some sort of white liquid dripping from the corners of his eyes, as if he were crying milky tears. Someone crashed into his shoulder, then another, and then suddenly, Ezekiel was on the ground. He could barely distinguish his son's screams from that of the crowd. "Daddy!" Ezekiel got off the ground, grabbed Sam, and ran to a nearby gate, stopping to gather his thoughts. Sam screamed again. "What's going on?" As Ezekiel held Sam against the gate, his eyes fixated on the scene in front of him. The giant teacups were operating normally, spinning and rotating rapidly. Yet inside the cups were lifeless bodies. Families of customers were hanging over the edge of the cups with their arms drooping down. On the floor, in between the swaying of the rotating cups, were piles of hair, fallen off the top of bloodied scalps. Sam screamed again. A deafening buzz filled Ezekiel's ears. He couldn't hear a thing, only a rhythmic pulsing sound that must have been his heart. A cacophony of words swirled in his mind. Earthquake, pipe burst, water, poison, terror, accident. He desperately tried to make sense of the scene in front of him, but before arriving at the conclusion, he clutched Sam to his chest and between sobs said, "Son, we need to leave. Keep your eyes closed." With Sam in his arms, Ezekiel made his way back into Fantasyland, following the crowd of people desperately trying to make an escape. He almost tripped. There were bodies lining the pathways. Ezekiel's surroundings continued to attack his senses with a blunt force of confusion and panic. Just ahead, a mother ran with a small child in her arms, screaming, "The eyes! The blue eyes! They are watching! They have my baby!" A young couple sat on the bench clasping at each other's throats until one went limp and fell over. An older man crawled with his face and belly to the ground, waving his arms and legs as if trying to swim through water. His skin blistered and bleeding, leaving a trail of smoldering flesh on the concrete behind as he crawled. Ezekiel ran through the crowd, seeing the cloud of mist that lay just before the castle's entrance. He turned his head back to see that the mist was also rising from the Toontown area, and seemed to be surrounding the park and the frantic guests completely. He had no choice but to hold his breath and run through the unknown gaseous substance. The screams were unbearable. The worst ones came from guests whose skin was melting off their face. As Ezekiel jumped over the bodies and shoved others aside, he couldn't shield his eyes from the horror. He was forced to witness the burst bodies scattered about with stomachs wide open. The sights of mothers with melted faces, searching blindly for their children with exposed meaty fingers. Their screaming muffled behind a layer of bloodied, loose skin. He continued to run down Main Street, smacking into other bodies, commanding Sam to keep his eyes closed, running faster and harder than he ever imagined was possible, pushing his body to every conceivable limit. As he approached the center, crowds of people gathered to consume the flowers around Walt Disney's statue. Beyond the statue, a sea of people were running toward the park's exit. Either from the park's loudspeakers or in his head, Ezekiel began to hear a song clearly repeating, "It's a small world after all." He halted, grasped at his phone in his front pocket, and attempted to read the map, hoping desperately that there was another exit in the park, but his fingers smudged blood across his screen. He lifted his hands and studied them briefly, relieved to see that the blood had not been his own. He looked down at his son, seemingly unharmed, sobbing uncontrollably, gave him a kiss on the ear, and ran forward. He ran to a point in the road in which there had been more bodies than street space. He slowed to carefully hop in between them, stepping through collected vomit, blood, and bile in the process, like a soldier storming the beach fronts of Normandy during D-Day. Some of the bodies he stepped over were trembling, some were completely naked. There were men, women, and children of all ages, all races, all walks of life. There had been no pattern, no conceivable idea to tie the chaos together. Some guests had faces that melted off. Others had just acted irrationally by eating flowers or doing jumping jacks and laughing uncontrollably. Others seemed physically healthy. During his escape, logic could not comfort him. Nothing made sense, including his own relatively healthy state. As he approached the crowd of people storming the exit gates, he continually checked on Sam to make sure nothing had happened to his son. They were both unscathed by the horrors that surrounded them. He hoped that if he could just get his son out in time, they might be safe from danger. Ezekiel maneuvered in and out of the gift shops of Main Street. Some park employees were trying to direct the crowd toward Some park employees were trying to direct the crowd toward the exit, but most were running themselves. Ezekiel ran past a Donald Duck that had to take off his head in order to vomit blood in it. Eventually, the crowd became so thick that he struggled to squeeze past guests. People shoved and smashed into each other like a crowd of a music festival, swaying back and forth with a unified energy of panic. Guests were shouting frantically for family members, sometimes in languages Ezekiel couldn't understand. He held Sam's head to his chest and inched forward toward the gates that were now visible. He felt a hand forcibly grab his shoulder. "Help me," a decaying voice said. Ezekiel turned to witness the melting face of a woman. Her brown hair had clumped together and fell out in chunks. Her eyes were covered by eyelids that had drooped down with the skin of her forehead next to her nose. Her jaw seemed to be coming loose, descending lower and revealing sizzling gums. Ezekiel shoved her to the ground and heard a splat. He moved forward next to a couple begging to be let through. The father, holding a lifeless child not more than 6 months old. Ezekiel couldn't stop himself from examining the face of the infant as he pushed forward with the crowd. The infant had stains of familiar white tears pouring down its abnormally wrinkled face. The parents screamed for help, screamed for anyone, but no one answered. Pushing past the entrance gates, over the piles of bodies, Ezekiel quickly adjusted his vision to witness the horrors which extended past the park itself. Desperate people covered in blood and extra skin poured out from the entrance of California's adventure park. Hundreds of guests of all ages crawled on the concrete, their skins sizzling, the stench of their decomposing bodies filling the air. The sound of police sirens pierced the air, and soon Ezekiel laid eyes on the flashing red and blue lights of emergency responders. Ezekiel ran, clutching Sam to his chest, until he couldn't run anymore. Thank you very much.